On March 14th, we traveled up to the state capital, Montpelier, to spend a couple of days at the Statehouse to learn about some of the issues the legislature is tackling as they navigated crossover week, the point in the legislative session where bills that have passed muster in either the state Senate or the House of Representatives must cross over for review and an up and down vote in the other chamber, if they are to have any chance of reaching the governor's desk for possible signage. It turned into a busy couple of days. On Friday, March 15th, we also had the chance to sit down with Governor Phil Scott for an extended 30-minute interview, where we heard his views on such issues as housing, education finance, climate, and the state's economy. The conversation was held in the ceremonial office at the Statehouse. All right. Well, first of all, Governor, thank you very much for making the time for this conversation. We really appreciate that very much.
Well, it's good to have you here.
I'm sure it's a busy time here in Montpelier. Every time's probably a busy time.
Yeah.
But I guess I had a couple of questions I wanted to kind of ask you about some of the main issues, I guess, of the day, at least as from what they seem like from my perspective down in the southern end of the state. And obviously housing is a big question. It's a big issue down in southern Vermont, as I'm sure it is up here in Washington and Chittenden counties and elsewhere. I guess I just wondered, long term, what do you think needs to happen in order to get more housing built for the affordable and workforce sectors? As much state and Senate money into it to lower the cost for developers, or is it regulatory reform we need? What do you see as the priorities?
Yes.
Both.
All the above. There's just so many different aspects of housing. It's something that we identified early on when I first came into office. As you might remember, I said that we need more housing. I've heard about it. I was in the legislature. I've heard about it, talked about it for years. We need more housing, but nobody was doing anything about it. And I thought, why don't we just do it? What is it that's preventing us from encouraging more development? And so we worked with the legislature. The legislature worked with us, and we provided a housing bond. And as you might remember, it was turned out to be $37 million. We proposed 35, it turned out to be $37 million housing bond, which at the time was the largest investment in housing the state had ever made. And we thought that was significant, 37 million, because it leveraged so much. It leveraged a lot of other private investment as well, so to the tune of maybe 200 million. That was back 70 years ago. We're still seeing the fruits of our labor in that respect. There are still housing projects that are coming online as a result of that money, because it takes time in the state to get anything accomplished, especially with the permit process, regulatory process, and so forth. So we thought we'd done a good thing, which we did, but it didn't solve the problem. And it certainly, during the pandemic, reared its ugly head and became even more exacerbated. So since then, many have started to see, we talked about it a lot, but we didn't get a lot of involvement from the legislature. But now, since then, they have said, we have a crisis on our hands. We have employers who are saying they can't find employees because they haven't got any place to live. We're trying to attract more people to the state, but we don't have any housing to put them in. So many have said we have a crisis on our hands. I agree. In fact, many of them ran on that issue the last election. Said we have a housing crisis. We need to address this. We need to work together. Yes, we do. But it's not all about money. Through the pandemic, we're receiving all the federal money we did, billions of dollars. I was able to convince the legislature to carve out a portion of that for housing. So we've invested more, like to the tune of almost $500 million in housing, state funded through the federal government, money we received from them, which is good. But it still hasn't fixed the problem. And so we started to look into it further. And when we do, it's not, we think about it in terms of houses in particular, but it's not just that, it's like unit development. So when you think about what we're doing today and what we need, we're only doing about a third of what we need. So if we look back, we see how many permits are taken out for housing at this point in time. It's about, let's say 2,500 to 3,000 permits. We need about 7,000 or 8,000 to kick back up to address the issue that we face. So it's not just about money, it's about regulatory reform. Act 250, local zoning, appeals, things of that nature. And then we need people to build them. And of course, we have a workforce shortage. But we need more housing in order to attract more people. So we don't have enough skilled workers to even build the homes. We'll put that aside for a minute. And what we need to do is to incentivize as well for developers, because we found that it's not cost effective for them to do. For developers to take on a housing project of any sort takes years to get through the process, and they're not willing to do it. They can do, commercial buildings are easy to do, much more lucrative, and that's what they've been doing. So on top of our ask, and we've been asking for this for 7 or 8 years, we need regulatory reform, Act 250 reform, 50-year-old law that needs updated. When that was first implemented, it was to reduce overdevelopment in the state. Mission accomplished. It did that. But there's a time and a place to reflect on maybe opening that spigot just a little bit more, at least during this time when we have a crisis. We all agree we have a crisis. And we get to today, and we all ran on this issue, but I look at what the legislature is doing or not doing, and I've not seen one single bill, one single housing bill pass either body. We're halfway through the legislative session. Not one housing bill has made it across to the other side. That tells me that their cries for help with housing is hollow, because we're not doing anything. We're not doing anything with Act 250. There's a conservation bill in the House that looks like it might pass, but it's not a housing bill. It's a conservation bill. It's actually going to expand the footprint of Act 250, not help housing. And it may be a good bill, but that's not what we need today. We need regulatory reform to bring more units online.
Isn't the thrust, or one of the main objectives of the bill, H687, that would allow for towns to avoid the Act 250 regulations? And wouldn't that have the effect of then making it easier for municipalities to say, look, we need more housing here, so this area here, we're going to zone it appropriately?
When I look at the overlay on the state map of what their proposal would do to the state in terms of attaching Act 250, it's like a solid color across the state. And I'm not sure that that's going to help us get through this. And I'm all for local control and putting it in the hands of the localities, but I'm not sure they can all agree either. And there are many in Vermont who say, why do we want to build more housing? I'm good. I don't want anybody else to come into the state. I like the state the way it is. But if we don't have the workers, look at our demographics. I've talked about this a lot. We're aging out. We're one of the oldest states in the nation, median age. And that's part of our issue too. And when you look at the last census, those under 18, we've lost 11,000 in 10 years. Last census proved that out. 11,000 out of the 18 and under category. We lost 28,000 out of the age group 40 to 55. That's the meat of our workforce. Lost 28,000 out of that group. We gained 44,000 over the age of 65. I'm a member of that. But that tells you everything you need to know. Like we don't have workers because we can't find housing. And we need the workers and the younger population to help us with healthcare costs and everything else we want to do. Schools, we've lost populations in schools, and now we have a $225 million increase we're facing in 1 year. Over the last, in terms of education spending, over the last 10 years, it's risen $1 billion. And we're educating fewer kids. And we're not getting the outcome either. The third grade reading level has decreased. Third grade reading level of math has decreased. So we're just average. We're paying a lot of money for average.
Well, that was the next question I had on my list. So you've offered me the perfect segue to that. Education financing. I mean, we saw a number of school budgets defeated this year, 1/3 roughly around the entire state. That's more than we've seen in recent years. Do you think it's time for a complete overhaul of the way we finance education in the state, that there just needs to be something that's just fundamentally different? I did some research on this. I think Vermont has a very unique way of financing education. No other state in the country seems to do it the way we do. And I guess I just wondered if, well, you had mentioned that maybe it was time to start thinking about slipping back to some local control from some of the school districts and whatever. But what do you think, if you could start all over again from a blank sheet, how should we spend?
It's a great question, because I ask that question all the time, or reflected on that over the last 10 years. If we, I take it like this: if we're poised to spend like $2.4 billion on education if everything passes, right? $2.4 billion. If somebody came to us and said, here's $2.4 billion, educate our kids, I dare say we wouldn't be doing it the way we're doing it today, right? We'd be doing something different. And it may be the same for our education formula as well. They all run their course. I mean, they've all gone through different periods of time, and with the Brigham decision, it forced Vermont to do something different. I think it's time to revisit that. I do, but I don't want people to take their eye off the bottom line. So when I hear some of the legislators trying to get through this $225 million crisis that we're facing, and the 20% increase across the board for average Vermonters who can't afford it, their answer is, well, we just need another tax. We need to raise. We got to provide relief. We got to raise $200 million, $225 million. But whose pocket's that going to come out of, right? Ours, collectively. So we're not fixing the structural problem we have with education in Vermont. Some are just looking for ways to fund it more. But I think that we should take it off from just property taxes. We should fund it in different ways. But let's not forget about the bottom line. How do we do it in a more efficient way? Because there's a better way of doing it. Again, we're losing kids every day. That statistic is real. That's not hyperbole. We should be more efficient. We need to consolidate schools. These are all issues that aren't popular, and they're ones that I brought up over the last 7 or 8 years. I vetoed budgets for a lot less money than $200 million of education funding. I think it was 1 year was maybe $13 million increase, and I vetoed a budget over that because I thought there was a better way. We presented ideas at that time about what we could do to reduce our costs. And admittedly, they weren't popular, weren't easy, but there were structural changes that would put us in a better position today had we taken just one of them. And now I think we're faced with a dire situation where they may have to consider some of those issues I brought up in the past. I've heard many say, well, the governor's not bringing us any ideas. And I keep saying, the same ideas I had 8 years ago are still relative to today. dust that off, use them to start with. But
So
they push back immensely on any of those ideas.
So did Act 46 not go far enough? I mean, that was supposed to consolidate a lot of districts, a lot of schools, close small schools, and force that. Did that just simply not get far enough? Because it ran into tremendous resistance, as I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, it didn't seem to do what it was intended to do. I just said this in the press conference the other day. You know, closing schools is a very emotional issue and very difficult to do. Shap Smith said this when he was speaker, I think. He said, everyone wants us to save money. I think we ought to consolidate schools, just not their own. There's a situation right now. It's local, but it's Plainfield, Cabot, Walden, Danville, right? They just put out a notice to all of the school district that they need more players for softball, baseball, and maybe field hockey or lacrosse. Between those 4 schools, they don't have enough players to form a team. How are you going to do that individually? How is that giving kids what they need? You know, they need full gamut. And we're going to be forced to consolidate. And that's got to be part of the solution as well.
I wanted to pivot a little bit to the Southern Vermont economy. And what do you see any particular need to incentivize economic development down in the southern half of the state? And related to that, actually, to kind of build on a point you were making earlier about the shortage of workforce. One of the people I spoke to recently, who heads up a regional commission, pointed to the impact that artificial intelligence, or AI, is potentially going to have, and that in some ways it will have tremendous impact on the kind of workforce we need. There will be some jobs that will be no longer in place, and new jobs will be created. I guess, is there any sense within the administration that we need to start preparing for the arrival in a big way of artificial intelligence, and then trying to connect that back to Southern Vermont? Is there some way, something you see that should be happening at that end of the state that maybe is not at the moment? 2 different questions.
Well, many different questions or many different answers within the questions. One of the best things I think we've done as an administration was, when I first came into office, was form the Agency of Digital Services. We didn't have anything like that before. Everyone was running, you know, like it was the Wild Wild West in terms of digital needs, and so we've been able to do that, and we've taken the lead early on AI and what the ramifications of making sure that we do it right. Other states have seen what we're doing and are gleaning some of that through the National Governors Association. We've been working with other states on that. So we are I think, on the forefront of AI. AI is both exciting and terrifying at the same time. And I'm not sure where we're going to end up, but we're fully aware of that, and we want to make sure that we do it in the right way. In terms of the economy in the southern part of the state, I share the concerns of the southern part of the state, much like I do the northern part of the state and the eastern part of the state and the western part of the state. The only part of the state that I'm not as concerned about is the northwest. The Chittenden County area, Burlington, and so forth. The economy in that area is doing okay. It could be doing better, but it's doing okay. The other, 12, 13 counties are struggling. And so I hear the same thing, whether it's in the Northeast, the Southwest, or the Southeast. We have some issues that we need to address. And that's why this administration, I've been focused on the rural counties. What can we do to help them? And every time we have, and our Agency of Commerce and Community Development knows very well my thoughts about that. Revitalize communities, bring them back up to what they once were, provide housing in those areas. This could be an opportunity when we have a housing shortage, for instance. How do we revitalize them? We have this VHIP program that we started because I thought about my own hometown of Barrie and how dilapidated it's become. And you've seen run down houses that were once in their prime were grandiose, right? Beautiful Victorian homes that are in disrepair now. So this VHIP program helped build out accessory dwellings and so forth. And we put more units online for far less money than what we've been spending. The average cost of a unit through the state government process, so to speak, is about $450,000 to $500,000 per unit. Building accessory dwellings and so forth, about $45,000 to $50,000 puts an apartment into some of those units and fixes those places up and breathes some life into these communities. So I think paying attention to that is something, trying to find businesses that will locate in some of those areas. But, you look down and I know it's not exactly in your region, but you look down in the southeastern part of the state and look what happened with Putney Paper of late. I mean, that's a huge amount of jobs lost there. And it seems to be eroding, in my view, ever since Vermont Yankee closed. Well-paying jobs that were down in that region. And it's been slowly eroding ever since.
I want to just switch over to another area that I think last year was being discussed a lot here and probably will be again, I'm sure. And it's the Clean Heat Act and renewable energy. I guess next year the Public Utility Commission is scheduled to, or is the Public Service Commission, I was the two of them mixed up, will be coming to, develop a plan that the legislature will then have to move forward on. Do you think the general thrust of the Clean Heat Act and before that the Renewable Energy Standard that is working around is the right approach long-term for the state?
I vetoed those initiatives, and the legislature overrode my vetoes. I'm very concerned about what this means, and we use this term a lot when you think about, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. When you think about all the things that we're doing. So right now we're faced with property tax increases about 20%, which is, we've never seen anything to that extreme. I remember when we back in December, when we put the letter out this morning that this is going to happen, many accused me of fear-mongering, that this wasn't going to happen. We just buy it down. We're not going to do this, and it's never going to do. It's not going to come to be. Well, it's here. And we don't have surpluses to buy it down, which is what I said then. So we have that. Last year, I vetoed the budget. They have like a 20% increase across the board for DMV fees. Some might say, well, what's 20% on a license or registration? Of course, we can pay that. But that added a lot of burden onto individual Vermonters, working class Vermonters in particular, businesses, so forth. That's 20% there. You think about what this clean heat standard, the budget itself grew by 13% last year. And I thought that was too much. Like, it comes out of somewhere. And now we're feeling the effects of that. So then the clean heat standard, don't know what that's going to cost. Going through the Public Utility Commission, I think it's going to be significant what comes out of there, but we'll see. Renewable Energy Standard. We forecast what they're doing in the legislature could cost between $500 million and $1 billion over 10 years. say over 10 years, split that up. Doesn't seem like that much, but couple it with everything else we're facing. And it's frustrating for me because I know our public service department had come up with another strategy that was far less money than that and satisfying our environmental concerns. So there's another approach, but it wasn't what they wanted. It's not what the utilities wanted. And the utilities and others were the ones that put this together. Our public service department has a responsibility to protect ratepayers. And I think I would advocate for the legislature to listen to what we have to say because we're trying to protect ratepayers.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question. And it occurred to me, actually yesterday, as I was driving up here, that this is exactly the 4th year anniversary of the start of the COVID pandemic and the shutdown in the state. I think it was actually March 13th. We're March 15th, but kind of close enough after 4 years. And I guess I just wondered, as you think back over what must have been an extraordinary period of time here, what do you think are the main lessons learned from this past 4 years, the experience the state went through, the world went through for that matter, but here in Vermont, what comes to mind when you think, if we ever had to go through that again, what would we do differently, or kind of what did we learn from it?
I've always ways to do things better. We were, during those 4 years ago, we were entering that time without a playbook. We weren't sure what was going to happen. Wanted to make sure that we were listening to the experts on this and doing what we could to protect Vermonters from something that was we didn't know what the effects would be. And I reflected back on that the other day and looked back 4 years ago about all the things we did during a 2-week period. I mean, it seems unreal, that surreal, unreal. I closed down bars and restaurants the day before St. Patrick's Day. We dismissed schools. We told people they couldn't go visit their loved ones in nursing homes. None of those, and on and on and on over a 2-week period. It was a number of different initiatives we put forward through our state of emergency and to protect Vermonters from something we didn't know much about. And but I think we were successful in working our way through that because we communicated. And we had those daily press briefings that lasted, some of them lasted 2 hours. But we stayed there and answered every question to the end, until there were no questions left. And then we did it again the next day and the day after that. And I think that that's what people needed. They just need the information. And had Dr. Levine, of course, who did a great job. And he's the country doc that we trusted. And I think that that's part of our success. I think in looking back from a federal standpoint, we very much appreciated the funding that came with that. But I think it was maybe just a little bit too much. It over-revved the economy. It created more money when there was a supply and demand was out of kilter. There was less supply, more demand, and they had the money to pay it. So it supercharged our economy, supercharged inflation. So there are a lot of things that we learned. The hotel-motel program was essential to begin with. The federal government asked us to do this, provided the funding through FEMA to pay for it, and we saw it explode. But we're still feeling the effects of that today. 1,800 people still in our hotel-motel program. And when previous to that, pre-pandemic, we were below 100. So I'm not sure that we should have been paying attention to some of the fundamentals. The inflation has caused a lot of the issues we face. Housing issues have become exacerbated because of it. On and on and on. So I think there's some lessons learned across the board that that we should pay attention to, but there'll be people far smarter than me that will probably, come to conclusions about the best way to handle it in the future. But I think, for the most part, with the attitude of Vermonters, I think we made it through fairly well. But we're still feeling the after effects of that still today.
And it ain't quite over yet, but
No, it's not.
certainly a big difference between now and 4 years ago, that's
Yeah.
for sure. Well, Governor, thank you again for your time.
Thank you
I
very
appreciate
much.
that very much, and I'm sure our viewers will find it most interesting to watch.
We'll see, right?